All menus have a start and end point. The timecode fields directly below each image tells you at what point in time the menu starts and stops. Menus will generally start at 0 timecode and finish at their total duration timecode value. As you can see in the end timecode field, this menu is 30 seconds long, give or take a frame. If your menu has a build like this one does, you'll want to take advantage of the loop point feature. The loop point determines where the DVD player will jump to when it reaches the end of the menu. Since our viewers will have already seen the build on the menu's first pass, they'll most likely not want to sit through it again and again, no matter how awe-inspiring it might be. The loop point slider allows you to set where in the menu stream the DVD player jumps to. Begin dragging the loop point slider to the right. As you do, notice the menu editor updates in real time to show you exactly where you are setting the loop point. Keep dragging until the build is finished, which is the point at which all the buttons have faded up on the screen. In the loop point timecode field, this should be roughly at the 6-second point. You can click these tiny up and down arrows to go backward or forward 15 frames. If you'll recall from Lesson 4, 15 frames is the size of an NTSC GOP, so the button will take you forward or backward 1 GOP at a time. Set the loop value to 5 seconds, 15 frames. Let's do a test. Drag your menu end slider to roughly 10 seconds. Call up the simulator by pressing Command Option 0. The menu will build on the screen, then play to the end, which we just set at 10 seconds. When the simulator reaches the end, instead of jumping back to the start of the menu, it will jump to the loop point at 5.5 seconds. Very cool. Now close the simulator. In the inspector, drag the end slider all the way to the right. Great! You're halfway to having the coolest menus on the block. Now I want to take a moment to discuss buttons. If you'll recall from Lesson 2, we never really created buttons for our menu, we just applied prefabbed style buttons from the palette. If your menu has a build, as this one does, you won't be able to use button styles, and you're about to see why. In the palette, drag a button into the menu editor and release your mouse. I'm using Block's gray text, but it really doesn't matter which one you use. Now call up the simulator. Notice the button remains on the screen even during the build. This, of course, is completely unacceptable visually. What we want to have happen is the button to appear after the build, in other words, at the loop point. Close the simulator and delete the button. One of the advantages of using Motion or Final Cut Pro to create your menus is that in addition to animating your button text on the screen, your text will always look much cleaner because you have the advantages of more sophisticated compositing tools. This is why I create 90% of my DVD menus in one of those 2 apps. I use the palette when I need a quick down and dirty menu that does not have or need a motion build. Okay, now that that's settled, we can move on to creating buttons that actually highlight when our viewers select and activate them. To do this, we'll employ what DVD Studio Pro calls an overlay. In the Asset tab, locate the Menu Overlays folder and open it. Inside, you'll find 3 TIFF still images. Double-click the triangle image to load it into the viewer. At its most fundamental, an overlay is nothing more than a grayscale graphic DVD Studio Pro uses to create your button highlight states. White pixels will be treated as transparent, gray pixels as semi-transparent, and black pixels as opaque. DVD Studio Pro uses the black pixels in the graphic to map or overlay a highlight color onto, hence the term overlay. For those of you familiar with the term key from the video world, the black is used as a key color that will get replaced by another color. Just so you know, this overlay was actually created and exported from Motion using the menu itself for proper registration and positioning. In this folder, I've included 2 other overlays, rectangles and check marks, so we could experiment with different looks. Click back on the Menu tab. To assign an overlay to the menu, drag the image out of the Asset tab and onto the menu background. When the drop palette appears, choose Set Overlay. Click on the menu background to load it into the inspector. In the center of the window is an item labeled Overlay File, where the file we just set appears. You can set a different overlay file by clicking the drop-down menu and navigating to the folder where your files live and choosing one from the list. And while we can clearly see from the inspector that an overlay file has been set, we see no visible indication of this anywhere on our menu. And we won't see anything until we actually create the buttons our viewers will interact with. To create a button, place your mouse cursor up and to the left of the Play Movie text, then drag diagonally to the right until the button completely encloses the text. You can resize the button by dragging on the dots surrounding the button. In order to see your overlay, go to the View menu and choose Button States Selected. Your overlay menu should now appear in yellow. Don't be alarmed if you're seeing a different color than mine. That simply means you have a different color set for the selected state, but we'll deal with that in a moment. If you're not seeing the overlay graphic at all, you may need to increase the size of your button. Since there are 5 text items on our menu, we'll need to create 4 more buttons. Since the first button has already been created, why reinvent the wheel? Let's just duplicate it by holding down the Option key and dragging the button downward, then position it over the second text item. Repeat these steps 3 more times for the remaining 2 text items. This would be a good time to point out that you want to avoid having these buttons overlap one another. Otherwise, the DVD player can get confused. If you need to, go back and resize each button, leaving just a bit of space between each of them, if possible. Our next step is to assign or map colors to the 3 states of our buttons. Make sure one of the buttons is selected, then click the Colors tab in the inspector. At the top of the tab, you can choose between 2 types of overlay colors, Simple or Advanced. Simple overlays are black and white images only, just like the one we assigned. DVD Studio Pro also allows you to work with so-called advanced overlays, which allow you to create button states with more levels of transparency. But I have to tell you, 99% of the overlays I've ever needed have been simple black and white overlays. They're quick, easy, and they get the job done. To assign the colors to your overlays, you'll use the 3 color drop-down menus for each of the 3 states of your buttons: Normal, Selected, and Activated. Each of the 3 states has its own color menu where you can assign up to 16 colors for each state. The opacity slider directly to the right of the color menus control how transparent or opaque you want your overlay to be. The normal state is the default state of the button prior to it being selected. Notice that the normal state's opacity slider is set at 0. If you drag the slider to the right, the overlay graphic for the non-selected buttons appear. Set the value of opacity to your liking. If you want to change the color of your overlay for the normal state, just choose a different color from the list. I'm kind of partial to black, so I'm going to set it back to black. The selected state is the state of your button when your viewer is making choices about where to go on your DVD. Currently, the color is set to yellow, but feel free to change it. I'm going to choose orange and set the opacity to 10. As you click inside the various buttons on the menu, the selected state color appears on the graphic. As I mentioned earlier, the color gets mapped or overlaid on the black pixels of the graphic. The final state, the activated state, is the state of your button when your viewer actually makes a commitment and pushes the enter key on his or her remote. Let's choose this royal blue color, then crank up the opacity to 15. That's interesting. When I click inside the button, I don't see the activated state color. In order to see this color, you'll need to choose Button States Activated from the View menu. There you go. An even faster way to view your button states is to click one of the 3 button state toggles at the bottom of the menu editor. There's a separate button for viewing the normal, selected, and activated states of your buttons. For those of you power users, if you press W repeatedly on your keyboard, you will cycle through all 3 view states. If you want to experiment and see what different overlay graphics look like for the menu, just drag a different overlay from the Asset tab into the menu editor and choose Set Overlay. Overlays give you a lot of freedom to experiment. The real power of using overlays is when they're used in conjunction with loop points. Call up the simulator by pressing Command Option 0. Notice, as the menu builds on the screen, there are no buttons visible yet. Then, at the loop point, the buttons appear, or rather, are triggered by the loop point. As you roll your mouse over the buttons, the selected state color appears for each button. If you click on a button, the button will briefly change to the activated color. Now close the simulator. The final step is to wire up our buttons. Let's do this a familiar way, then use a really handy shortcut. To connect the Play Movie button to the Play All Movies track, select the button, then from the Target drop-down menu in the inspector choose Tracks and Stories, Play All Movies, Track. By choosing the top item in brackets, you are telling the DVD player to begin playing from the beginning of the track. The other items in the list are the chapter markers we created for this track back in Letter. Choose the target item at the top of the menu, then choose an element from the list. For the Scene Select button, we need to choose Menus, Catalina submenu, Menu. The other items in the list are the actual buttons on the menu, which if chosen, will set the target to highlight an individual button on the submenu. For now, just choose the top menu item. For the Slides button, right-click and choose Target, Slideshows. Wait a minute, there is no slideshow. In the last lesson, we converted it to a track. So choose Tracks in Lesson 4. DVD Studio Pro will allow you to connect your buttons to specific chapter markers if you